So how would you feel if you could connect with loved ones just one more time, since they've already passed on? Many cultures around the world hold celebrations that honor this tradition, and one of the most popular cultures that does this is the Mexican culture. In Mexican culture, people hold a national holiday in order to bond with their deceased ancestors and honor the legacies that have been left behind. Instead of fearing death or allowing their loved ones to be forgotten, Mexicans celebrate those that have passed on by celebrating Dia de los Muertos. And I am not of Hispanic origin, so that probably was said wrong, but that's okay. And in this tradition, they remember the history behind why they are celebrating. They blend life and death through symbolic decorations, and they make purposeful connections between themselves and their deceased loved ones. Connections with the dead are just as important as our connections with the living, and the Mexican culture surely provides an amazing example of that. So one way that Mexicans embrace death and celebrate those who have passed on is by continuously remembering the history behind this tradition. So this tradition can be traced back to Aztec religious beliefs, and their goddess, whose name means Lady of the Dead. There is an original Aztec ritual to honor the dead, but this was also the time of the harvest, which symbolizes a light time into a dark time, or summer turning into fall. And this was ultimately blended with Roman Catholic beliefs when the Spanish came over and took over Mexico. And now the Day of the Dead aligns with All Saints Day and All Souls Day on November 1st and November 2nd. So another way that the Mexican culture embraces death and celebrates those who have passed on before them is through blending life and death through symbolic decorations. So I have a couple of examples of this. There are skeletons that people use for face paint, such as here. This lady here, there is that. And normally these skeletons are in a happier face, so that it shows that death is not something to be feared, but is in fact a part of life and should be celebrated. And then people choose to wear these face paints in order to embrace death and their own mortality by looking in the mirror and seeing the death that is represented on their face. Another example are marigold flowers, and these look like this. They are yellow orange flowers, and these are called Flor de Muerto, which is flower of death. And people put these at grave sites or on the altars that they build to their loved ones. These are thought to attract the souls of their loved ones in order to bring honor to them through their altars and all the other things that the Mexican culture does to help celebrate the dead. And then the final example for this is sweet treats that are in the shape of skulls. And these are called calaveras. And they are kind of like a meringue dessert. And so you were able to eat them and paint them with edible paint. And these help to represent dead family members and those that the living wish to remember and honor. Finally, another example of how Mexican culture embraces death and celebrates those who have passed on is that they make purposeful connections between themselves and their deceased loved ones. So for example, many Mexican people build altars to their loved ones as memorials. These altars can include photos of the deceased, or their favorite food, or their favorite flowers. And a lot of these altars also include a representation of the four elements. So you have water, fire, earth, and wind. And so the fire is represented normally by a candle, and then water is represented by a cup of like purified water that they'll leave there. And then wind is represented by colorful papers that they'll cut up into certain designs. And the earth is represented by pan muerto, or the bread of the dead. And in addition to making altars to their deceased loved ones, some Mexicans will go to cemeteries and celebrate with their loved ones, either having parties where they dance in the cemeteries, or there they build their altars and just have a symbolic time of silence and of peace with their dead ancestors. Ultimately, the Day of the Dead helps Mexicans honor their loved ones that have passed on, and they help them to have a better connection with these loved ones. Also, the Day of the Dead helps Mexicans to understand that death is not something to be scared of, but that it is a, regular part of life, and it is part of our life cycle that we shouldn't fear, but expect. And I think that American culture can learn a lot from this Mexican tradition, and can ultimately incorporate this into our everyday lives and do a better job of remembering those who have gone before us. Thank you.